Alright, hello everybody. Sir Leon here once again, and well, the last time we would have looked at factorization, and that would have given us the knowledge that we need to move on to today's topic, which is a very lovely topic. It's something that a lot of people have requested me to do a video about, so I'm finally here. I finally did all the things that I think you need to know in a video before I can move on. And that topic is the solving of quadratic equations. Now, before we can go ahead and solve any quadratic equation, let's look at the word quadratic. Quadratic comes from the word quad, which means square. Alright, so a quadratic equation is an equation with a square term. For example, let's say we got x squared plus 3. That is a quadratic expression, we got to equal to 0. That is a quadratic equation. As long as we have a square term inside of the equation, it can be considered a quadratic equation. Alright, so let's go into the solving of this quadratic equation. Now, just like in a quadratic expression, the general form for a quadratic equation is ax squared plus bx plus c. This is general form for the expression, but the equation will be equal to 0. The same thing, but the only thing is that we equated 0. And we know the difference between an equation and an expression is that in an equation we have the equal sign. Alright, so this is the general form for the quadratic equation, where a will be a number, b will be a number, and c will be the number itself, or you can say the constant. Alright, so as long as it looks like this, or as long as we have a square term, is a quadratic equation. Alright, and this is the general form. This is what we would like a quadratic to look like, or this is what a quadratic should look like. Alright, so let's look at the actual solving. Now there are, I think, 4 ways in which we can solve a quadratic equation. We can solve it by 1, factorizing, 2, we can solve by completing the square, or we can use the quadratic formula. Now I will do all 3 of these things in a separate video. What we will be looking at today is solving quadratic equations by factorization, or we can say the AC method, the method that we used in the previous video. Alright, so let's look at this first example. The instructions say solve the quadratic equation. Good. Now the first step that you want to do when solving any quadratic equation is to factorize it. That is why I said we needed to know how to factorize before we can solve quadratic equation. So we just gotta factorize it, right? So this is a normal thing. So if you want to factorize this, first thing we do is you put in brackets, and then these two are not perfect squares, so we cannot use the perfect square method. And so we have to factorize, we have to take out what is common between these two terms. And if you look at these two terms, you see x is common, so we factor out the x, and this will be left with x minus 6, and that is equal to 0. And that is how we factorize it. But if we want to solve it, we have to take it one step closer, one step further, in which we will be equating now. When we factorize, we're splitting it into 2 factors. So we want to do equate these 2 factors to 0. And that will give you the values for x. When in quadratic equations, x will always have 2 values. There will be 2 values that will satisfy this equation. So we put the first term, the first factor, which will be x, and we equate it to 0. So we don't have to do any work there. We already saw that x is equal to 0. And then we use the second factor. X minus 6 is equal to 0. And we solve for x. X will be equal to, when we take over the 6, will become a positive 6. So we can say, therefore, x is equal to 0 and 6. And that is how you solve for a normal quadratic, or that is how you solve using the factorization method. Alright, so we are at example 2, and the instruction says solve the following quadratic equation. Now, as I said earlier, the first thing you gotta do if you want to solve a quadratic equation is to factorize it. And we see that we have 3 terms here. So the method that we will use the AC method to factorize this, because we want it to be 4 terms so that we can split it into 2 brackets and do our thing. So we gotta use the AC method. And we know the AC method is basically, this is in the general form. A will be this, B will be this, and C will be this. So the AC method, which will be A times C, will be 2 times 6, which will give you 12. And we said with the AC method, we want to find 2 numbers, and we multiply it, we get 12, and we add it, we must get 7. So 2 plus 6, that will give you 8. So we can't use that. So we got to find 2 other numbers. What are 2 numbers that we multiply to get 12? 3 times 4 will give you 12. 3 plus 4 will give you 7. So we can use 3 and 4. Alright? Good. So we substituting 3 and 4 into this equation and replacing 7x. I remember whatever is the letter that is in front of this here, we gotta put back that letter in front of this. So this will be 2x squared plus 3x plus 4x plus 6, and that is equal to 0. And then we want to factorize, you just pair them off. And then we factorize. So we got 2x and 3x. What is common there? We see x is common. So we factor out the x, and we're left with 2x plus 3 in one bracket. And then if we look at this here, we got 4x and 6. And we see 2 is common. Plus 2, right? So when you factor out the 2, you're left with 2x plus 3. And that is equal to 0. And then we know from the last lesson, we put the terms outside the bracket into one bracket. So we now get x plus 2 in one bracket and 2x plus 3 in the other bracket, and that is equal to 0. And just like in the previous example, we got to equate both of these factors to 0 and solve them, and that will give you the values for x. So we do the first bracket, x plus 2, and that is equal to 0. X will be equal to, when we take over this 2, it will become a negative 2. And then we solve for this one. 2x plus 3 is equal to 0. So we solve for x. This will be 2x is equal to, this will become a negative 3. X is equal to negative 3 divided by 2. So we can say, therefore, x is equal to negative 2 and negative 3 over 2. As simple as that. Alright, so let me just recap what you have to do when you're solving a quadratic. In this case, we had to use the AC method. When you're solving any quadratic, the first thing we have to do is factorize it. And when you factorize it, after you finish getting the 2 factors, you then equate those 2 factors to 0, and you solve for each bracket separately. Alright? Alright, so we have this final question. I want you to solve it, and when you finish solving it, I want you to comment the answer. X squared plus 3x is equal to 10. If your answer is correct, I will react and love to it. If it's not correct, I will react to thumbs down or something of this sort. So let me see how you will solve this quadratic equation. Good luck, everybody.